In this video I'm going to show you how I built these cyberpunk Necromunda Underhive inspired shipping container buildings that you can use in any of your favourite tabletop wargames. And best of all, they double up as storage for your other bits and bobs. Welcome to Cheap and Easy Wargaming, where we make hobby fun, fast and affordable.
So to start with, it was a case of looking around the house to find boxes that fit inside each other. The lid of the box is going to be the shell of the building, so it needs to be able to cover the whole of the box that you're going to be storing things in. Not sure what this is, some kind of laundry thing, but the boxes are really good. I've got even less idea what Marc Jacobs means, but this box was given to me with some paints inside, so this is my third and final victim. For a lot of the doors and windows, I'll be using these plastic dominoes that are very cheap and easy to come across. I've bought a few of these sets from various car boots and charity shops. They do scale really well, and it takes very little effort to make them look like a door or window with a frame around. So if you want to make shipping containers as well, you'd just use the same techniques that I'm using here, obviously just leaving out the doors and windows and extra details. Also with a shipping container, you make sure you leave one of the ends that not corrugated, obviously to be the doors. And then what we want to do, just using the box itself as a template, is just cut out a panel for each side and the top of the boxes. For the doors on the end here, we're just going to keep it super simple. I'm just going to measure the halfway mark it at the top and bottom, and then using a ballpoint pen, just draw a heavy line straight down to make sure there's an indentation. While I was cutting out the sides earlier, I made sure I marked whether they were top or sides just to avoid any confusion later. So this one you can see is the side. So I used some PVA glue, which is going to hold the whole thing together later on. But that's going to take about 24 hours to dry properly. So just to hold things in place while I'm building so I can keep things moving, I'm going to put a little blob of hot glue in each corner. This will allow me just to keep on working on it whilst that glue is still drying. This time of doing this was literally the first time I've ever tried doing this. So it was here that I realized I've made a mistake. Rather than just having the dominoes laying on top of the corrugated card here, I wanted to look like the doors and windows were actually cut into the construction of the building. So this was simply a case of drawing around the dominoes and then cutting out without cutting too deeply into the card, as you can see here. And as you can see, that worked quite nicely. It didn't cause too many problems, but I will be cutting it out before gluing for the next ones. Which brings us to my least favorite part of this build. Now we have to make the L-shaped beams that go around the edges of all of these shipping containers. For this, I'm just going to use a piece of cereal box card, cut off one of the sides to make it more manageable and make sure it's got a nice square edge to start with. From here, I use the centimeter markings on the cutting mat. The first line is going to be a heavy score with a ballpoint pen. The next will be a faint line, just so I know where to cut. The next will be a heavy score, faint line, heavy score, faint line. Most of my miniatures are Green Army Men scale, which stand about 5 centimeters tall, so the 1 centimeter beams here work quite well for that. However, if you are using smaller scales like 28 or 32 millimeters, then you might want to consider slightly thinner beams. This stage is very boring, but it's best just to do a big stock of them so then you've got them already and you can just move on with your life. I tend to start with the longer edges, so folding that into a right angle, fitting it along the corner of the shipping container, just marking the longest point so you know where to cut. And then I changed my technique a few times through the process of this. Initially, I just marked it off here and then eyeballed a 45-degree angle each side of that to cut. But then thought for better consistency and to speed the process up, I would make myself a little template here, 45 degrees, so I can rest this point against the end of the card here so I know that I've got the right angle every time. And just to clarify, that's the right angle, not a right angle, because a right angle would be the wrong angle. Using the hot glue here, we want these pieces to stay in place once they're glued and to hold their shape. Using PVA would take a very long time to dry, would probably keep popping back off unless it's held in place and may even cause warping. For the strips along the bottom of the containers, because we don't want them to fold in and prevent the box from being slid out, we are just going to use 1 centimeter strips and we're going to place them along the bottom edges. So first I stuck the doors and windows on using this all-purpose glue. It's brilliant glue, but it does take a long time to dry. So similar to the PVA trick we used earlier, I would just add a blob of hot glue as well, just to make sure it's all held in place while the all-purpose glue does its thing. On to box 2, we're going to do just exactly the same thing again. However, Mommy Don't Raise No Fool. We're going to make sure we cut out these doors and window shapes first. So last time I used a pen to score the lines and draw the lines. So this time I intend to do it with just the blade. So I use the back of the blade first to score the first centimetre, and then use the actual blades to cut off the second centimetre strip. And I'm glad I did it, because this did give much nicer lines and creases. Also, to reduce waste and just add some extra details, I glue on these bits of corrugated card randomly. This just looks like makeshift repairs that have been done over the years. So this next bit I blatantly stole from another YouTuber. I highly recommend that if you're this far into my video, then you should definitely go over and check out this guy's channel, because he's got some amazing stuff over there. I will put a link in the description below. But for now, this is just my very basic take on how Doc makes air vent fans for the sides of buildings and machinery. It's going to be mounted in the milk bottle cap that I've drawn around, and I just draw around onto a piece of plastic from an ice cream tub lid. I'll then cut out the circle smaller than the outside of the lid, because obviously it needs to fit inside. I've drawn a cross in the center where I want to make the cuts, but obviously I've drawn a circle in the center there so I don't cut right the way through. Then by simply twisting each of these segments, that will just make it into the individual fan blades. Just to make it a little bit more obvious that they are fan blades, I also cut out another section just so each blade was more individual. I needed something small and round to be the front of the fan here, and again, something to just create that space at the back of the fan where it goes into the milk bottle top, and it turns out these googly eyes just jumped out at me and they were perfect. It might be worth painting inside the milk bottle cap before you stick it all together, just to make things easy later on. That's how I would have done it if I wasn't filming for this video. And once you're ready, just glue it all into place and glue it onto the side of your building. One thing that would have made this 100 times better is cutting out the actual hole in the building so it fits into it rather than just looking like it's stuck on the side. But for that level of craftsmanship and expertise, you're going to have to look at Doc's channel, unfortunately. More botch job repairs involving rusty metal sheets riveted over damage. For this, it might have been better using something smaller than a ballpoint pen, maybe a pin, which I've used for lots of other things. That seems to work better. This is just some more random details using offcuts from the corrugated card, just adding some cladding or cover to these doors. These dominoes would work fine as windows as they are, but with this being the Underhive, we wanted to give everything a bit more of a secured, repaired, covered up kind of look. I cut out some completely random shapes from one of these plastic baskets. I often see these kind of things just broken and thrown away at the side of corner shops. Initially wanted them to be able to use them for ladders, but then I've discovered that there's all kinds of uses for them. This is just one of them. It's very soft and easy to cut, making it ideal for little projects like this. And anyone that's watched any number of terrain videos will know exactly what granny grating is. It doesn't really require much of an explanation. Here I'm doing more patchwork repairs with the riveted metal plates, but this time I'm using a pin, which you'll probably see at the end. It gives a much better result. So this box is for some kind of washing clothes things that children aren't supposed to have. So it's got this clever little locking device. As for the box itself, it's very good quality, very sturdy, so it's perfect for what we want to do. But first of all, we just need to get rid of this safety device on the side. As you can tell from the way I'm using this blade without even having a handle on it, I believe safety devices are for wimps. I'm a big believer in Sir Isaac Newton's theory of survival of the fittest. And as such, I'm not even wearing safety goggles as I record this video. I didn't want all of the doors to just be made out of the dominoes. I wanted to add some variety. So this technique is very similar to what I used for the Tatooine buildings in an earlier video. Cutting the lid off a margarine tub gives a nice curved shape. Also gives that interesting outline already for the door frame or border. Because the rim causes the center to sit slightly away from the main body of the building, I'm using this black piece of foam to stick to the back of the door to the building in order to just fill that gap. Back to the PVA and hot glue trick from earlier. Then I'm going to go back to that plastic basket and cut out some random shapes again just to fill this door. Now I really wish I'd thought of this technique when I was making the Tatooine buildings, because I believe the end result here looks so much better than what I did back then. And like I said earlier, with this plastic being so soft and malleable, it makes it very good for this kind of thing, just cutting and trying and cutting and trying. Once that's done, I can do the same again with the windows. So I'm going to use milk bottle caps again, inverted for this. And again, just trial and error, just cutting a bit, seeing if it fits. If not, cutting a bit more, until eventually you've got a shape that just clips in there nicely. And then just copy around that shape again, rather than having to keep the trial and error going. And whether by luck or skill, this technique did seem to work out and it fitted perfectly. Like I said earlier with the fan, if I wasn't making a video here and I was just making this for myself, I would paint the inside of the milk bottles and that margarine tub first before I started putting the black frames on it. Speaking of painting, I didn't film it, but I just took these boxes outside and used all of the different colours spray cans I have just to give them a blend of all different kind of cyberpunky type colours. For the metal bars on the shipping container doors, I'm just going to use a wooden skewer. Could use a cocktail stick as well. It might be a better scale, but I didn't have one to hand. These ladders are made from a plastic tennis racket, and again, that's a fairly well-known technique. Here I'm going to scratch build some ladders on the back of this building using a few zip ties. 2 longer lengths to make the sides of the ladder, then just using some shorter lengths to make the rungs, which for some reason I didn't film properly, so there's only this short clip. I'm not sure what went wrong there. Another easy way I like to do ladders, as I said earlier, is using these plastic baskets again, just measuring it out and just cutting out what you need. Lovely and easy to trim into whatever size and shape. I want to add a little bit of pipe work, which is classic kind of Necromunda Underhive looking stuff, but I want to keep it simple and cheap. So in that case, I don't want to have to mess around with bendy pipes that go into buildings or anything. I'm using an old felt tip pen for the pipe and thought it'd be easy to just use the cutters on these pliers to cut through it. Turns out it worked, just not nearly as easily as I thought. Maybe it's just time to invest in some new pliers. So in order to cheat and not have to make bends for the pipes, to make them look like they're actually functional for something, I'm just going to cut some random blocks out of this foam and then just glue the tube between the 2 blocks of foam to make it look like it's actually going somewhere or doing something. I like to add little details like this, like electrical boxes or control panels that might function as kind of objectives for a future scenario. And I do talk about those in more detail on my previous video of baked bean can silos. And that's why I try and have them next to doors as well. They can be electronically locked. It can be part of the scenario to break in, hack in through the electrical system possibly. So it's not Necromunda if it doesn't have hazard stripes. Here I've printed some hazard stripes just onto sticker paper. These are just normal stickers, but the bottom, as you can see, I've sellotaped over to give it a plastic glossy look. It all depends where I intend to use them as to which I use. And these sheets here are just an image search on the internet, and there's lots of little warning stickers and just interesting little details I can stick on. So starting with the hazard stripes, using a ruler and a blade, just cutting them into strips. Some of the thicker ones I will fold in half because I'm going to put those onto the corners of this building as so. I'll use the PVA glue to paint straight onto the building. I'll then put the stripes on and then use PVA again over the top in order to just give it a finish and a coating protection. If I had thought about it in advance, I would have cut the foam blocks the right size for these stickers to make it look like the electrical boxes actually have warnings on them. These hammer beads are very cheap and easy to get hold of, and I use them a lot in different builds for all kinds of different things. They're very versatile. Here I'm going to be using them to connect wires to the electrical boxes just to give things a bit more of realism or kind of rundown Necromunda Underhive kind of look. I do that on all of the electrical boxes or anywhere that I think wires might look cool hanging. Then I take a silver and start highlighting any bits that I think would be bare metal, whereas anything scratched or any highlights details that need to stand out. Given more time, I would have liked to have painted all of these silver things brown first in order to give them a kind of rustier, dirtier finished look. And just to show this is post-apocalyptic, I even started dabbing some silver on with a brush. Speaking of brown, I'm going to dab this on as well with a brush now. This is to simulate the rust and general grime, dirt in the Underhive. This is going over all of the silver I've just painted as well to make that dirtier and grubbier. In hindsight, maybe I should have left the brown and the orange rust until the final layer and made sure all of the colours were on first. Because what I'm doing now is just painting colours over the top of the rust. While they're still wet, I use a tissue on my finger just to rub some of the paint away, again so the rust and the silver can show underneath. I use this cheap yellow that doesn't cover very well just to paint some of the electrical boxes. And then I try my hand as a graffiti artist using some of these fluorescent paints that I've had for a long time, and they didn't work when I first bought them and they don't work now. Here I wish I'd either painted these dominoes first before I added the frames or just left the windows black inside. This yellow was a really bad idea. But hey, live and learn. I make these mistakes so you don't have to. More yellow boxes, and I wanted to break up the colour on this roof here. It's a very large open space. I would have liked to add details like vents or ducts or pipework or something, but I wanted to keep it flat so that in future we can stack things on top of it and build it vertically. Then a few of the muted colours around just to add a bit of variety. I really do want it to look like here everything has been stolen from somewhere else. And because I've got them here next to me and I intend to throw them away after today anyway, I just see what I can do with these fluorescent acrylic paints. Well, that answers that question. They really are rubbish. They didn't work on paper when I first bought them or models. Now I'm going to start stippling on the orange with a sponge. So ideally I would have done the brown rust effect just before this and then started adding the orange on as well. I'm going to glue on those plastic tennis racket ladders that I didn't do earlier because I knew it would be a pain trying to paint in between the rungs. Once that's done, I'm going to take some old earphone wire and I'm going to cut it into lengths that will reach from one box to another into those hammer bead tubes that we did earlier, using a blob of hot glue on the end. Just hold that in place for a second or two and that should be fixed. You can use a random blob of hot glue here and there as well just to make sure it's stuck where it needs to be so it's aesthetically pleasing. That's another technique I wish I'd used on the Tatooine build I did some months ago. And as a final little detail, I'm just going to add a few little coloured beads, red and green beads, to represent kind of LEDs, power warning lights on these electrical boxes. I know that certainly won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I lack the skill and patience and volition to paint lights onto the buildings myself, so for me that works just fine. So these are the finished products. There are things I've learned from doing this that when I do the next batch I will do differently. I certainly will be making more of these kind of buildings in the future, each with a bit more character, with more of a specific purpose. And I'm going to be working on a system for being able to stack them, different ways of kind of setting them up, having different walkways. I'm hoping to actually do a very quick, simple walkways video in the next few days. So since I started this channel about 10 weeks ago, this is what the boot of my car looks like, which really winds Jodie up every time we need to go food shopping or we need to go on a family journey. So with that in mind, these boxes are a really clever way to keep your gaming bits organized and tidy and even easy for transportation if you're taking them to your gaming shop or to your friend's house to play. Especially if you're playing smaller skirmish scale games, the kind that I do, then you could easily fit all your characters, your dice, rulers, rulebook into one or two of these boxes, no problems. Just time for a few quick glamour shots. So this kind of scenery works great for obviously Necromunda, Underhive, post-apocalyptic kind of cyberpunk type scenarios, 40k, any of the kind of miniature agnostic skirmish games that I play, such as Sword Weirdos, Space Weirdos, Planet 28, 5 Parsecs, Space Station 0. They're very versatile, and like I say, in the next video I'm going to make some very simple bridges and walkways to link the buildings together, and then as the collection grows there'll be infinite possibilities for different layouts and setups you can have. I remember playing Warhammer in the 90s and looking through the White Dwarf magazines at all the Necromunda setups, and they always looked so cool, all these different layers and levels. Same as the Inquisitor game that came out in 2001, I believe. Just completely blew my mind and sent my imagination overdrive. If you found anything in this video useful or inspiring in any way, then I would really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. It really makes a massive difference. Otherwise, please remember to look after yourselves, and until next time, keep being cheap and easy.